The Desolate Battle on Mars. In the year 2135, on the barren, wind-swept plains of Mars, Sergeant Michael Cross found himself surrounded. The Martian sky was a deep crimson, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Towering over him were insect-like alien warriors, their chitinous armor glinting under the harsh light of the sun. Their segmented bodies moved with a strange, fluid grace, and their eyes shone with a malevolent intelligence. They circled him, their sharp mandibles clicking in what he could only assume was their version of laughter. Sergeant Cross was no ordinary soldier. A veteran of countless skirmishes across the galaxy, he had faced down some of the deadliest foes known to humankind. Yet these creatures, taller, stronger, and far more technologically advanced, seemed to find him amusing. Their mocking tones and dismissive gestures spoke volumes. They saw him as weak, a lone human far from home, stranded and weaponless. But Cross had no intention of being their entertainment. His eyes narrowed as he assessed his surroundings, his mind racing through the possibilities. These aliens didn't know what they were up against. They were about to learn that underestimating a human, particularly one like him, was a grave mistake. Cross slowly reached down to his boot, his movements calculated to avoid drawing too much attention. Hidden there was a compact EMP grenade, a relic from his last mission. The aliens were so caught up in their derision that they didn't notice his subtle movements. His heart pounded in his chest as he activated the device, knowing he had only one shot. With a sudden fluid motion, Cross hurled the grenade into the center of the alien circle. The small device erupted in a blinding flash of light, followed by a deafening silence. The alien warriors staggered, their advanced armor systems momentarily disabled by the electromagnetic pulse. Their mocking laughter was abruptly cut off. Without missing a beat, Cross bolted toward a nearby rock formation. He had no intention of engaging in a direct fight with these creatures. Survival was his only goal. Using the rugged Martian terrain to his advantage, he quickly disappeared among the rocks, his mind working through the next steps. The aliens, still reeling from the EMP blast, took a few moments to regain their senses. When they finally did, they found their quarry gone. The air was thick with tension as they regrouped, their anger palpable. They had underestimated the human, and now they were paying the price. But Cross wasn't finished yet. He maneuvered through the rocky landscape, his steps light and calculated. Every move was informed by his extensive training and experience in alien encounters. He knew that brute force wouldn't win this battle. It was his wits that would carry him through. The Martian terrain was both his ally and his enemy. While it provided ample cover, it also slowed him down. The aliens recovered quickly, their systems rebooting as they resumed their pursuit. Their movements were swift and coordinated, but Cross was always 2 steps ahead. Finally, he reached his intended destination, a narrow canyon with steep walls. It was a natural trap, and he intended to use it. As the aliens funneled into the canyon, still focused on their prey, Cross triggered a seismic charge he had planted earlier. The canyon walls shook violently, and rocks tumbled down, effectively sealing the entrance and trapping the aliens inside. As the dust settled, Sergeant Cross quickly assessed his situation. The aliens were trapped, but he knew it wouldn't be for long. Their technology was far more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. It was only a matter of time before they found a way out. With no time to waste, Cross moved swiftly, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the canyon. His mind raced with plans and possibilities. He needed to find a way off Mars and back to the human colonies, where he could warn them about this new and terrifying alien threat. As he traversed the rugged Martian landscape, a glimmer of hope emerged in the distance. Partially buried in the red soil lay the wreckage of an old Earth research vessel. It was a long shot, but if he could salvage some parts, maybe, just maybe, he could send a distress signal back to Earth. The silent discovery. Approaching the wreckage cautiously, Cross kept his senses sharp, aware that danger could lurk in every shadow. The ship, a relic from the early days of Mars exploration, was battered and worn by years of sandstorms and harsh conditions. Its once proud hull was now a crumbling shell, half buried in the Martian soil. The silence was eerie as Cross made his way inside, every creak of metal and crunch of sand beneath his boots echoing ominously. The interior was dark, and the air was heavy with the scent of dust and decay. He moved carefully, his eyes scanning the debris for anything useful. In the dim light, Cross spotted the remnants of a communications console. It was damaged, its wires frayed and its screen cracked, but it was the best chance he had. With a deep breath, he set to work, using every bit of his training and ingenuity to repair the console. Hours passed as he painstakingly reconnected wires, bypassed broken circuits, and adjusted the power flow. The process was slow and frustrating, but finally, with a flicker of light and a burst of static, the console hummed to life. Cross quickly composed a message, detailing the alien encounter, their advanced technology, and the urgent need for reinforcements. He transmitted the message on all emergency frequencies, hoping it would reach Earth or one of the human colonies. As the transmission ended, a sense of unease settled over him. He knew he couldn't stay at the crash site for long. It was too exposed, too vulnerable. He needed to find shelter and plan his next move. Leaving the wreckage behind, Cross scanned the horizon for any sign of pursuit or rescue. The Martian landscape stretched out before him, a vast expanse of red dunes and rocky outcrops. He knew that the aliens wouldn't be far behind, and he needed to stay one step ahead. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet, not from another seismic charge, but something far more powerful. Cross looked up, his heart skipping a beat as he saw a colossal alien ship descending from the sky. Its size dwarfed anything he had ever seen, its surface alive with shifting patterns and colors. This was no mere scouting party. This was an invasion force. Cross's mind raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. His warning might have gone unheard, or perhaps it had arrived too late. Either way, he was now up against something far beyond his worst fears. But Sergeant Michael Cross was not one to back down. With grim determination, he prepared himself for the inevitable confrontation. The fate of Mars, and perhaps all of humanity, now rested in his hands. The infiltration. Sergeant Cross watched with a mixture of awe and dread as the massive alien ship descended, casting a vast shadow over the Martian landscape. The ship's hull was unlike anything he had ever seen, an ever-shifting liquid-like metal that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly glow. It was clear that this vessel was more than just a transport. It was a fortress, a mobile command center for the alien invasion. Cross knew he had to act quickly. If he could somehow get aboard the ship, he might find a way to sabotage it, or at the very least, gather intelligence on the alien plans. The risk was enormous, but so were the stakes. The fate of Mars, and potentially Earth, depended on him. Keeping low to the ground, Cross used the Martian dunes for cover as he approached the ship. His military training had taught him how to move silently and avoid detection, but the alien technology was so advanced that he wasn't sure if his tactics would be effective. Still, he pressed on, driven by the urgency of his mission. As he neared the colossal vessel, Cross noticed a small section of the hull that seemed less fluid than the rest, a panel that appeared to be an access hatch. It was a slim chance, but it was the best he had. He cautiously made his way toward it, scanning the area for any signs of alien patrols. Reaching the panel, Cross attempted to interface with it using his suit's onboard tech, but the alien systems were completely foreign to him. The symbols and controls on the panel were unlike anything he had encountered before. Frustration gnawed at him as he struggled to make sense of it. But he didn't give up. Then he remembered the alien device he had confiscated during a previous skirmish, a small, strange object that he had never fully understood. With no other options, Cross decided to give it a try. He pulled the device from his pack and held it up to the panel. To his surprise, the device reacted, glowing softly as the panel began to shift and open. A hatch slid open with a hiss, revealing a narrow entrance. Cross hesitated for a moment, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. But there was no turning back now. He slipped inside just as the hatch closed behind him, sealing him in darkness. Activating his suit's light, Cross found himself in a narrow corridor. The walls were made of the same liquid metal as the ship's exterior, pulsating softly as if alive. The air was thick and humid, carrying a faint metallic scent. Moving as quietly as possible, he began to explore, his senses on high alert. The interior of the ship was a labyrinth of twisting corridors and strange, alien chambers. Cross moved cautiously, every step deliberate as he tried to map out the layout in his mind. The ship seemed deserted, its crew likely focused on the invasion outside. But Cross knew better than to let his guard down. He had faced too many dangers in his time to take anything for granted. After what felt like an eternity, Cross stumbled upon a large chamber filled with screens and controls, a command center of sorts. The screens displayed various views of Mars and the solar system, along with streams of data that he couldn't fully comprehend. He quickly began recording everything with his suit's camera, hoping that the information would be valuable to Earth's forces. As he worked, Cross suddenly heard a sound that made his blood run cold, the clicking language of the aliens. They were approaching the command center. His heart raced as he looked around for a place to hide. There in the corner, a panel was slightly ajar. Without a second thought, he squeezed into the narrow space just as the aliens entered the room. From his hiding spot, Cross could see the aliens operating the controls, their hands moving with a speed and precision that was almost hypnotic. They seemed to be coordinating a larger plan, possibly the first wave of the invasion. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This was just the beginning. If he didn't get this information back to Earth, humanity might not stand a chance. As the aliens continued their work, Cross silently debated his next move. He needed to get out of the ship and find a way to transmit the data he had gathered. But the odds of escaping unnoticed were slim. The ship was a fortress, and he was deep in its heart. After what felt like hours, the aliens finally left the room. Cross waited until their footsteps faded into the distance before emerging from his hiding spot. His nerves were frayed, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He now had a new mission: to get this information back to Earth, no matter the cost. He moved quickly and carefully, retracing his steps through the labyrinthine corridors. Every corner he turned brought the risk of running into more aliens, but he had no other choice. He had to keep moving. The fate of his planet depended on it. After what seemed like an eternity of navigating the alien vessel, Cross finally found what he was looking for: a small, sleek spacecraft docked in a hangar. It was likely an escape pod or a short-range shuttle. Either way, it was his ticket out of there. The craft's control panel was a complex array of alien symbols and interfaces, but Cross was undeterred. He had a knack for technology, and after a few tense moments, he managed to power up the craft. The engines hummed to life, and the ship's systems began to come online. As Cross prepared to launch, an alarm blared throughout the hangar. His presence had been detected. The alien soldiers would be on him in moments. With no time to lose, he engaged the ship's thrusters, feeling the sudden lurch as the craft lifted off the hangar floor. The hangar doors opened, revealing the vast expanse of the Martian sky. Cross gritted his teeth as he steered the craft through the opening, narrowly avoiding a barrage of alien fire. He was free, but the danger was far from over. The small ship shot out of the hangar and into the Martian atmosphere. Cross's fingers danced over the controls as he plotted a course away from the alien mothership. He needed to get as far away as possible, find a place to hide, and figure out how to transmit the vital information he had gathered. But even as he put distance between himself and the alien vessel, Cross knew that the hardest part of his mission was still ahead. The aliens would be hunting him, and the odds were stacked against him. But he had something they didn't: human determination and a will to survive. And that, he knew, could make all the difference. A desperate escape. Sergeant Cross's escape from the alien mothership had been nothing short of miraculous, but as his small craft sped across the Martian sky, he knew his ordeal was far from over. The alien ship loomed ominously in the distance, its size dwarfing everything around it. It wasn't just a vessel. It was a symbol of the overwhelming force that now threatened humanity. Cross's mind raced as he piloted the alien craft. He needed to find a safe place to land, somewhere he could transmit the critical information he had gathered. But Mars was a hostile planet, and the alien technology was completely foreign to him. Every minute he spent in the air increased the risk of detection. The craft's sensors beeped urgently, alerting Cross to the presence of incoming enemy ships. He glanced at the display, his heart sinking as he saw multiple blips closing in on his position. The aliens weren't going to let him escape without a fight. With a grim determination, Cross pushed the craft to its limits, weaving through the Martian canyons and using the terrain to his advantage. The alien ships were fast, but they lacked the intimate knowledge of the planet's surface that Cross had. He had spent years training on Mars, and every rock formation and canyon was etched into his memory. But the aliens were relentless. They pursued him with a ferocity that spoke of their desperation to prevent him from escaping with the valuable information he carried. Laser fire streaked through the sky, narrowly missing his craft as he executed daring maneuvers to avoid being hit. Cross's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for anything that could give him an edge. And then he saw it, a large, sprawling crater with steep walls. It was a risky move, but it might be his best chance. He steered the craft toward the crater, diving sharply as he approached the edge. The alien ships followed, but Cross was already executing his plan. He pulled up sharply at the last moment, skimming the crater's edge and dropping down into the deep bowl. The aliens, moving too fast to adjust, overshot the crater, giving Cross a precious few seconds to act. Inside the crater, the atmosphere was tense and claustrophobic. The walls towered above him, and the sky was a narrow strip of red at the top. But it was also a perfect hiding place, at least for the moment. Cross set the craft down on the crater floor, its landing gear crunching against the rocky surface. He powered down the engines, holding his breath as the alien ship circled above. The seconds stretched into eternity as he waited, every muscle in his body tensed for action. But after what felt like an eternity, the ships moved on, their sensors unable to penetrate the thick walls of the crater. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Cross knew he couldn't stay here for long. The aliens would eventually realize he had gone to ground, and they would search every inch of the planet if they had to. He needed to find a way to transmit his data and get off Mars. Exiting the craft, Cross surveyed his surroundings. The crater was desolate, with jagged rocks and loose soil underfoot. But there was something else, an old mining outpost, partially buried in the side of the crater. It was likely abandoned, but it might have the equipment he needed to send his message. Cross made his way to the outpost, moving quickly but carefully. The structure was dilapidated, its metal walls corroded by years of exposure to the harsh Martian environment. But it was intact enough to provide shelter and possibly a means of communication. Inside the outpost, Cross found a small control room with a long dormant communications array. The equipment was old, but it was Earth technology, something he could understand and operate. He quickly set to work, using every bit of his technical knowledge to bring the systems back online. As he worked, Cross couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The aliens were out there, and they wouldn't give up easily. He needed to send his message and move fast. Finally, after what felt like hours, the communications array hummed to life. Cross quickly input the data he had gathered, composing a message that detailed everything: the alien mothership, the invasion plans, and the technology they were using. He transmitted the message on all frequencies, hoping that it would reach Earth or one of the human colonies. As the transmission ended, Cross slumped back in his chair, exhausted but relieved. He had done it. The information was out there, and with any luck, it would reach the right people in time to make a difference. But his relief was short-lived. The sensors in the outpost blared to life, detecting movement outside. Cross's blood ran cold as he realized the aliens had found him. They were closing in, and this time there would be no escape. He grabbed his weapon, knowing that his chances were slim. But he wasn't going to go down without a fight. He had come too far, risked too much, to give up now. The door to the outpost burst open, and the aliens poured in, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Cross opened fire, his shots precise and deadly. But there were too many of them, and they were closing in fast. As the aliens advanced, Cross retreated deeper into the outpost, using the narrow corridors to his advantage. But he knew he was running out of time. The aliens were relentless, and their numbers were overwhelming. Finally, he reached the control room again, cornered with no way out. The aliens blocked the only exit, their weapons trained on him. Cross gripped his rifle tightly, ready to make his last stand. But then something unexpected happened. The aliens hesitated, their movements slowing as they seemed to receive new orders. Cross watched in confusion as they suddenly retreated, leaving the outpost as quickly as they had entered. Cross was left standing alone in the silence, his mind racing. Why had they pulled back? What had changed? Then it hit him, the message. The aliens knew he had sent it, and they were retreating to deal with the larger threat. They were abandoning the outpost, likely to regroup and prepare for the next phase of their invasion. Cross didn't waste any time. He needed to get out of the crater and find a way off Mars. The battle was far from over, but he had bought humanity some time. And now, it was up to him to make sure that time wasn't wasted. With renewed determination, Cross set off into the Martian landscape once more, ready to face whatever came next. The Alliance. Sergeant Cross moved swiftly across the Martian landscape, his mind focused on one goal: survival. The Martian sun was setting, casting long shadows across the barren terrain, but there was no time to rest. He had to find a way off the planet before the aliens regrouped and resumed their hunt. As he pushed forward, Cross thought about the message he had sent. He could only hope that it had reached Earth or one of the human colonies in time. The data he had gathered was crucial, but it was just the beginning. The alien threat was vast and far-reaching, and humanity would need more than just information to win this war. After several hours of trekking across the rugged landscape, Cross came across a sight that made him pause: a small human settlement nestled in a canyon. The settlement was one of many that had sprung up during Mars colonization efforts, but this one appeared to be abandoned. The buildings were intact, but there were no signs of life. Cautiously, Cross approached the settlement. The place was eerily quiet, the only sound being the wind whistling through the narrow canyon. As he entered the main square, he noticed something strange: the signs of a recent struggle. Scorch marks marred the walls, and debris littered the ground. It was clear that something had happened here, and not long ago. Cross's instincts told him to leave, but something else caught his attention: a faint signal on his suit's sensors. It was a distress beacon, weak but persistent, coming from one of the larger buildings at the edge of the settlement. Against his better judgment, Cross decided to investigate. The building was a communications hub, its equipment old but still functional. As Cross entered, the distress signal grew stronger, leading him to a small, reinforced room in the back. The door was partially open, and inside, Cross found a group of survivors, humans huddled together, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. One of them, a woman in a tattered uniform, looked up as he entered. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse from dehydration. "Sergeant Cross," he replied, lowering his weapon. "I'm with the Earth Defense Force. What happened here?" The woman introduced herself as Dr. Elara Fields, a scientist who had been working at the settlement before the aliens attacked. She explained that they had been studying the Martian atmosphere when the invasion began. The aliens had hit them hard, destroying their defenses and taking most of the inhabitants prisoner. Only a handful of them had managed to hide and survive. They were looking for something, Dr. Fields said, her eyes dark with worry. "Something beneath the surface. We detected unusual energy readings a few weeks ago, and I think the aliens are after whatever it is." Cross frowned. "Do you have any idea what it could be?" Dr. Fields shook her head. "No, but it's powerful. If the aliens want it, it can't be good news for us." Cross felt a chill run down his spine. The situation was worse than he had imagined. Not only were the aliens launching a full-scale invasion, but they were also searching for something on Mars, something that could potentially turn the tide in their favor. "We need to find it first," Cross said, his voice firm. "If we can get to it before they do, we might have a chance to stop them." Dr. Fields hesitated. "Even if we find it, what then? We're outnumbered and outgunned." Cross looked around the room at the weary faces of the survivors. "We fight," he said simply. "We may not have their numbers, but we have the element of surprise. And we have something they don't: human ingenuity." The survivors seemed to take some comfort in his words, but the reality of the situation was grim. They were a small group, isolated on a hostile planet, facing an enemy with overwhelming power. But they had no other choice. They had to try. Dr. Fields led Cross to the settlement's command center, where they accessed the data from the atmospheric studies. The readings pointed to a location deep beneath the surface, several kilometers from their current position. It was an ancient structure, buried for millennia, and the source of the energy readings that had attracted the aliens. "We need to get there before they do," Cross said, studying the map on the screen. "And we need to be prepared for anything." The survivors began to gather what supplies and weapons they could find. There wasn't much, just a few old rifles, some rations, and a handful of mining explosives. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Cross took stock of their situation and began to formulate a plan. As night fell over the Martian landscape, the small group of survivors set out toward the coordinates of the ancient structure. The journey would be long and dangerous, but they moved with purpose, knowing that the fate of their planet might depend on their success. Cross took the lead, his military training kicking in as he guided the group through the treacherous terrain. The path was rough, the air thin and cold, but they pressed on, driven by the urgency of their mission. The landscape around them was alien and unforgiving, a stark reminder of the challenges they faced. As they neared their destination, Cross's thoughts turned to the enemy. The aliens would not give up easily, especially if they were close to finding whatever lay beneath the Martian surface. The final confrontation was inevitable, and Cross knew they needed more than just weapons to win. Dr. Fields walked beside him, her face tense with worry. "Sergeant, if we find this structure, what then? What if it's something we can't control?" "We adapt," Cross replied. "That's what we do. We'll figure it out." As they approached the location, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The energy readings were growing stronger, and the air was charged with static. Whatever was down there, it was powerful, and it was waking up. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and a deep rumbling echoed through the canyon. The group staggered, struggling to keep their balance, as the earth split open before them. A massive ancient structure began to emerge from the depths, its surface covered in strange, glowing symbols. The survivors stared in awe and fear as the structure rose, towering above them. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a relic of a long-forgotten civilization, and it pulsed with a terrifying, otherworldly energy. Cross's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but he knew there was no turning back now. The aliens would be here soon, and they had to act fast. As they approached the structure, a sudden, blinding light filled the sky. The survivors shielded their eyes as a massive alien ship descended, its weapons trained on the ancient site. The final battle had begun, and Cross knew they were in for the fight of their lives. But as the aliens prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. The ancient structure responded, its symbols glowing brighter as a protective barrier formed around it. The alien ship fired, but its weapons were deflected by the barrier, leaving it unscathed. The survivors looked at each other in shock and confusion. The structure was defending itself, but why? And what did it mean for their mission? Cross didn't have time to ponder the implications. The aliens were regrouping, preparing for another assault, and the survivors needed to act. They had to find a way into the structure, discover its secrets, and use whatever they found to turn the tide of the battle. With a deep breath, Cross led the way toward the entrance, the survivors following close behind. The door to the ancient structure slid open, revealing a dark, foreboding interior. There was no telling what awaited them inside, but they had no other choice. They had to go in. As they stepped into the darkness, the door closed behind them, sealing them inside. The air was thick with the weight of the unknown, and the walls seemed to hum with a life of their own. Cross's heart pounded in his chest as he led the way deeper into the structure, the fate of Mars, and perhaps all of humanity, resting on their shoulders. They were about to discover the truth behind the ancient structure, and whatever it was, it would change everything. The heart of the machine. The interior of the ancient structure was unlike anything Sergeant Cross had ever seen. The walls were smooth, almost organic, and they pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow that seemed to resonate with the heartbeat of the planet itself. The air was thick and warm, filled with an energy that buzzed at the edge of perception, making every hair on his body stand on end. As the survivors moved deeper into the structure, the strange glow intensified, illuminating their path with an eerie, otherworldly light. The passageway they followed spiraled downward, leading them deeper beneath the Martian surface. There were no markings, no signs of any inhabitants, just the constant hum of the structure, as if it was alive and aware of their presence. Dr. Fields walked beside Cross, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. This place, it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's as if the entire structure is a single, living organism. Cross nodded, his senses on high alert. Whatever it is, it's powerful. We need to stay focused. We're here to find something that can help us fight the aliens. The group continued their descent, the passageway narrowing as they went deeper. The air grew warmer, almost stifling, and the hum of the structure became louder, more insistent. Cross could feel it in his bones, a low, vibrating thrum that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. The others felt it too. Their faces were tense, their movements cautious. After what felt like hours, the passageway opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were lined with intricate patterns that pulsed with light, forming a complex web of energy that converged at the center of the room. There, suspended in midair, was a massive crystalline structure, its surface shimmering with 1,000 colors. The survivors stared in awe at the sight before them. The crystal seemed to radiate power, its light bathing the chamber in a soft, ethereal glow. Cross could feel the energy emanating from it, a force so strong it was almost overwhelming. This was the source of the energy readings, the heart of the ancient structure. Dr. Field stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the crystal. This is it. This is what the aliens are after. This is what they were trying to find. Cross approached the crystal, his mind racing. What is it? Some kind of power source. Fields nodded, her voice trembling with excitement. I think so. But it's more than that. This isn't just a machine. It's alive. It's some kind of ancient intelligence, a consciousness embedded in the crystal. Cross felt a chill run down his spine. If the aliens get their hands on this, they'll have the power to destroy us all. Fields turned to him, her expression serious. We can't let that happen. But we also can't just leave it here. We need to find a way to use it against them. Before Cross could respond, the chamber began to tremble, the walls vibrating with a deep, resonant hum. The crystal pulsed with a brilliant light, and the energy in the room surged, filling the air with a crackling intensity. Cross knew instinctively that something was happening, something big. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber began to shift, the patterns on the surface rearranging themselves into new, intricate designs. The crystal's light grew brighter, almost blinding, and the air hummed with power. The survivors backed away, shielding their eyes from the intense glow. As the light reached its peak, a figure began to form within the crystal, slowly taking shape. It was humanoid, but unlike anything they had ever seen. Its body was made of the same crystalline material, shimmering with 1,000 colors, and its eyes glowed with a deep, otherworldly light. The figure floated above the ground, its gaze fixed on Cross and the others. When it spoke, its voice echoed in their minds, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Who dares to awaken the Guardian? Cross felt his heart skip a beat. This was no ordinary machine. This was an ancient being, a guardian left to protect whatever secrets the structure held. "We are humans," Cross said, stepping forward. "We came here to stop the aliens from taking this power and using it to destroy us." The Guardian's eyes flickered with light, as if considering his words. "The invaders seek to control the heart of Mars, but they do not understand its true nature. The power within is not meant to be wielded by the unworthy." Dr. Fields stepped beside Cross. "Please, we need your help. If the aliens succeed, they will destroy our world. We only want to protect ourselves." The Guardian was silent for a long moment, its gaze fixed on the humans before it. Finally, it spoke. "The heart is ancient and powerful, a relic of a time long before your kind walked the stars. It was created to preserve the balance, to protect the fragile harmony of the universe. But its power is not without cost." Cross felt a deep sense of foreboding. What kind of cost? The power of the heart can only be wielded by those who are willing to sacrifice everything. It is a burden, a responsibility that cannot be taken lightly. Those who seek to control it must be prepared to face the consequences. Dr. Fields looked at Cross, her expression filled with determination. "We don't have a choice. If we don't use this power, the aliens will destroy us. We have to take the risk." Cross nodded, his resolve hardening. "We're willing to do whatever it takes to stop them." The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter, its form shimmering with energy. "Very well. If you are truly willing to accept the burden, then the power of the heart will be yours. But know this, once you take this power, there is no turning back. Your fate will be forever intertwined with the heart, and its destiny will become your own." Cross felt the weight of the Guardian's words, but he knew there was no other option. The survival of humanity depended on them. "We accept." The Guardian extended its hand toward the crystal, and a beam of light shot out, enveloping Cross and the others in its glow. The energy was intense, almost overwhelming, but Cross felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. This was their only chance, and he was ready to face whatever came next. As the light faded, the Guardian's form began to dissolve, merging back into the crystal. The chamber returned to its previous state, the energy subsiding, but something had changed. Cross could feel it. A connection, a bond with the heart of Mars. The power was now theirs, but with it came a heavy responsibility. Dr. Fields looked at Cross, her eyes wide with realization. "We did it. We actually did it." Cross nodded, but his mind was already racing. The aliens would be here soon, and they needed to be ready. The power they had gained could turn the tide of the battle, but they had to use it wisely. "We need to get out of here," Cross said, his voice filled with urgency. "The aliens won't stop until they have this power. We need to take the fight to them." The survivors quickly gathered their gear, preparing to leave the ancient structure. As they made their way back up the passageway, Cross felt the power of the heart pulsing within him, a constant reminder of the responsibility they had taken on. But as they emerged back into the Martian landscape, they were met with a sight that filled them with dread. A fleet of alien ships, hovering in the sky above the canyon, their weapons trained on the ancient structure. The final battle was about to begin, and this time, the fate of not just Mars, but all of humanity rested in their hands. The final stand. The Martian sky was ablaze with the glow of the alien fleet, their ships casting long shadows over the canyon as they descended, preparing for the assault. The ground trembled beneath Sergeant Cross and his team as the massive vessels unleashed their power, creating shockwaves that reverberated through the ancient structure behind them. Cross stood at the forefront, his gaze locked on the approaching ships. The power of the heart pulsed within him, its energy coursing through his veins, making him feel both invincible and deeply aware of the immense responsibility he now carried. The fate of humanity hinged on what happened next. Dr. Fields was by his side, her face a mix of determination and fear. "They're not going to stop, Cross. They'll tear this place apart to get what they want." Cross nodded, his mind racing. "We can't let that happen. The heart gave us this power for a reason. We have to use it to protect what's left of our world." He turned to the other survivors, who were scattered around the entrance to the ancient structure, readying themselves for the inevitable battle. They were a small group, outnumbered and outgunned, but they were all that stood between the aliens and the total destruction of humanity. "Listen up," Cross called out, his voice carrying over the howling Martian wind. "This is it. This is our last stand. We got the power to fight back, but we have to be smart about it. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone back on Earth." The survivors looked at him, their expressions grim but resolute. They knew what was at stake, and they were ready to do whatever it took to protect their home. The ground shook again as the lead alien ship fired its main cannon, the beam of energy slicing through the air and slamming into the ancient structure. The blast sent a shockwave through the canyon, knocking several of the survivors off their feet. Cross felt the impact deep in his chest, but he remained standing, the power of the heart anchoring him to the spot. Dr. Fields staggered beside him, clutching her side. "We can't just stand here and take this. We need to strike back." Cross knew she was right. The time for waiting was over. He reached out with his mind, tapping into the energy of the heart, feeling it respond to his thoughts. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. A vast, limitless well of power, ready to be unleashed. He focused on the lead alien ship, the one that had fired the cannon. He could feel its presence in his mind, the hum of its engines, the pulse of its weapon systems. It was like he was connected to it, part of it, and he knew he could control it. With a surge of willpower, Cross directed the energy of the heart toward the ship. The ground around him began to glow, cracks of light spreading out from his feet as the power built up, focusing into a single devastating beam. The air hummed with energy, and then, with a deafening roar, the beam shot upward, slamming into the alien ship. The ship's shields flickered and failed under the onslaught, and the beam tore through its hull, slicing the vessel in two. The explosion lit up the sky, a brilliant flash of light that sent debris raining down over the canyon. The other alien ships immediately responded, their weapons locking onto Cross and his team. But Cross was ready. He reached out again, this time targeting multiple ships at once. The power of the heart surged within him, expanding his awareness until he could feel every ship, every weapon, every soldier in the fleet. He unleashed the power in a series of blasts, each one striking a different ship. The Martian sky was filled with explosions as one by one, the alien vessels were torn apart, their shattered remains crashing down onto the barren landscape. But the aliens were relentless. For every ship Cross destroyed, another took its place. The sky was thick with their forces, a seemingly endless tide of enemies. Cross could feel the strain of using the heart's power, the immense pressure building in his mind and body. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Dr. Fields grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "Cross, you're overloading yourself. You need to stop." "I can't," Cross gritted out, his voice strained. "If I stop, they'll overwhelm us. We have to hold the line." But even as he said the words, he knew she was right. The power of the heart was vast, but it was also dangerous. If he pushed too hard, he risked losing control, and if that happened, the consequences could be catastrophic. Just as he was about to pull back, a new presence entered his mind. It was the Guardian, the ancient intelligence within the heart, and it was offering its help. You cannot fight them all alone. The Guardian's voice echoed in his thoughts. The power of the heart is meant to protect, not destroy. Let me guide you. Cross hesitated, but he knew he didn't have a choice. He opened himself fully to the Guardian's influence, letting it take control of the power. Immediately, the strain lessened, and the energy flowed more smoothly, more naturally. The Guardian knew how to wield the power of the heart far better than he did. Together, they directed the energy outward, not as a weapon, but as a shield. A massive dome of light spread out from the ancient structure, enveloping the survivors and the entire canyon. The alien ships fired their weapons, but the beams and missiles were absorbed by the shield, dissipating harmlessly in the air. The aliens, sensing the change in tactics, began to regroup, preparing for another assault. But Cross and the Guardian were ready. Instead of fighting the entire fleet, they focused on the ground beneath the alien ships. The power of the heart flowed through the Martian soil, deep into the planet's crust, and then erupted in a series of massive tremors. The ground shook violently, splitting open in great chasms that swallowed the alien ships whole. The Martian surface heaved and cracked, sending shockwaves through the fleet, and the remaining ships began to retreat, unable to withstand the planet itself turning against them. The survivors watched in awe as the alien fleet was decimated, their ships falling from the sky or fleeing into the blackness of space. The tide had turned, and the battle was over. Cross stood at the center of the devastation, his body trembling with exhaustion. The Guardian's presence was still with him, but it was fading, its task complete. The heart of Mars had fulfilled its purpose, and now it was time to let it rest. "Thank you," Cross whispered, feeling the last of the Guardian's consciousness slip away. The light of the heart dimmed, returning to a soft glow, and the power that had surged through him gradually faded. Dr. Fields approached him, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "You did it, Cross. You saved us." Cross nodded, but he felt a deep weariness settle over him. The battle was won, but the cost had been high. He could feel the weight of the heart's power still lingering in his mind, a reminder of the immense responsibility they had taken on. "We all did," he said quietly, looking at the remaining survivors. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive, and they had stopped the alien threat. As the Martian sky returned to its usual crimson hue, the survivors began to regroup, tending to their wounds and assessing the damage. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The aliens would be back, and next time they would be even more determined. But for now, they had bought humanity some time. Time to regroup, to rebuild, and to prepare for whatever came next. And with the power of the heart at their side, Cross knew they had a fighting chance. As they began the long trek back to their base, Cross looked up at the sky, his thoughts already turning to the future. The battle for Mars was just the beginning. The real fight was still ahead, and he was determined to see it through to the end, no matter what it took. The road ahead. As they walked, a heavy silence hung in the air. Each survivor was lost in their thoughts, processing the enormity of what had just transpired. They had faced an enemy far beyond anything they had encountered before, and they had survived. But the cost had been great, and the future was uncertain. Dr. Fields, walking alongside Cross, broke the silence. "We need to get this information back to Earth as soon as possible. They need to know what we're up against." Cross nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "We will. But first, we need to make sure everyone here is safe. We've won a battle, but the war is far from over." The base came into view, a small outpost nestled among the rocky outcrops of Mars. It had been their home, their sanctuary, but now it felt different, more vulnerable, more exposed. The knowledge that they were now the front line in a war that could determine the fate of humanity weighed heavily on everyone's minds. As they approached the base, a figure emerged from the entrance, waving them in. It was Lieutenant Blake, one of the few remaining officers at the outpost. His face was a mix of relief and worry as he saw the group approaching. "Thank God you made it," Blake said, his voice filled with genuine relief. "We've been monitoring the battle from here. It was intense." "That's one way to put it," Cross replied with a tired smile. "But we're here, and we've got a lot to report." Once inside the base, the team quickly set to work. They needed to assess their resources, patch up the wounded, and prepare a detailed report for Earth. The heart of Mars had been their savior, but it was also a mystery they needed to understand. Cross knew that the more they learned about the heart, the better prepared they would be for the battles to come. Dr. Fields immediately began analyzing the data they had gathered, her fingers flying over the console as she pulled up holographic displays of the alien fleet, the heart, and the seismic events they had triggered. The sheer scale of the information was overwhelming, but she was determined to make sense of it all. "We need to figure out how the heart works," she muttered, mostly to herself. "If we can harness its power more effectively, we might stand a chance in the next encounter." Cross stood behind her, watching the data scroll across the screen. The alien technology was like nothing they had ever seen, and the heart was the key to understanding it. But it was also dangerous. Too much power in the wrong hands could lead to disaster. "Take your time," Cross said. "We need to be sure about this. The last thing we need is to make a mistake with something this powerful." As the hours passed, the team worked tirelessly. They sent out a distress signal to Earth, hoping that reinforcements would arrive before the aliens returned. They fortified the base as best they could, using the alien wreckage to reinforce their defenses. And all the while, the knowledge of the heart's power hung over them, a reminder of the precarious balance they were now a part of. Finally, as the Martian sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the base, Cross called the team together. They gathered in the central command room, the atmosphere tense but resolute. "We've done everything we can for now," Cross began, his voice steady but filled with the weight of leadership. "We've sent out our signal, and we're as prepared as we can be. But we all know that this isn't over. The aliens will be back, and when they come, we'll need to be ready." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each survivor. They were tired, battered, but still standing. They had faced the impossible and come out the other side, and that gave him hope. "We're in this together," Cross continued. "We've got the heart, we've got our wits, and most importantly, we've got each other. No matter what comes next, we'll face it head-on, and we will survive." The room was silent for a moment, and then Blake spoke up. "Whatever happens, we're with you, Cross. We've come this far, and we're not turning back now." The others nodded in agreement, a sense of camaraderie and determination settling over them. They had faced the abyss and come out stronger. Now, they were ready for whatever the future held. As the team dispersed to get some much-needed rest, Cross remained in the command room, staring out at the Martian landscape. The alien fleet had been driven off, but the signs of battle were still visible. Scars on the land, reminders of the war that had just begun. He knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. The heart of Mars had given them a fighting chance, but it had also placed a target on their backs. The aliens would return, and next time, they would be even more determined to claim the power that lay beneath the Martian soil. But Cross also knew that they weren't alone. Earth would respond to their signal, and reinforcements would come. Humanity had faced impossible odds before and triumphed, and this time would be no different. With a final glance at the horizon, Cross turned away from the window. There was still much to do, and the road ahead would be long and perilous. But as long as they stood together, he knew they could face anything. The battle for Mars was over, but the war for humanity's future was just beginning. And Sergeant Cross was ready to lead the charge.